Good evening, everyone. I jumped the gun a little bit on that intro, but I'm so excited to be here, and it is 5:55, so we're going to go ahead and get rolling. I wanted to open by talking to you guys just a little bit about this little thing I found from the Daily Mail, whom I love. You guys know this. And this is an article that says just 6 extra minutes of physical activity every day can boost brain power in middle age. Both moderate and vigorous activity vital to staving off declining brain function, and exercise is thought to improve memory and mental processes such as planning. I love this so much because it's so important to get outside into the sun. I don't know if you guys follow Andrew Huberman, but he is a wonderful speaker, highly educated man who conducts these really interesting interviews with all of these high-level educated people who talk about all kinds of fascinating medical and like scientific studies. And one of his big deals is getting outside into the sun, hopefully right after you wake up. This is really hard for me to do right now because it's pretty much always cloudy around here, and it's finally starting to snow a little bit because, shockingly enough, even in January up north, it still hasn't snowed much at all. It's been unseasonably warm this winter. But I really love the idea of getting outside and exercising is such a wonderful 1-2 combination of things that are really good for you. It turns out that most Americans are really deprived of vitamin D. And I actually don't know dietary sources of vitamin D. I only know that you can get it from the sun, and you can also take it in supplement form, which is something that I do in addition to trying to get outside as frequently as I can. I take vitamin D for my brain. My neurologist recommended it. And we saw with COVID that people really were benefiting from having more vitamin D in their systems. It is possible to get too much, so make sure you are not taking too much. Talk to your doctor about it. On the docket tonight, we're going to talk about Hawley introducing the PELOSI Act, which is going to ban lawmakers from trading stocks. And holy cow, it's about time. This goes on both sides of the aisle, and it's never okay. Technically, it could be okay if they weren't also really, truly, definitionally insider trading. We're going to talk about the ex-Twitter employee who talked to the FTC and explained that Twitter employees can access God mode, which enables them to program and post from any account. That's insane to me. You can make it look like someone who's tweeting who's not really. And I'm going to also talk about spooks in Silicon Valley, how the flow of U.S. intelligence analysts into big tech firms is raising alarm. We're also going to mention Kristi Noem saying that her phone was hacked, and she is blaming the January 6th Commission. I don't know if you guys remember, but it turns out that her whole family's social security numbers were compromised by the January 6th Commission. And from what I can see, nothing ever came of that. So I hope she really pursues this through to the hilt. Joe Manchin is flipping on Joe Biden after more files were found. I think they found more files on Saturday or Sunday. Conveniently on the weekend when no one's really paying attention, they found yet more files, including items, which could literally be boxes of files that Joe Biden took home, apparently. But he's not the only one who's doing this. We know Trump did it as well. And most recently, today, we found that it looks like Mike Pence had some classified documents at his home in Indiana, too. Ted Cruz is demanding accountability for all this. I don't know if you guys were watching this, but it looks like the TSA's no-fly list was leaked by a hacker. So we're going to look at that too. We'll give Andy his opportunity to tell us that hackers aren't necessarily bad. They just have terrible PR, for sure. That is technically correct. We're going to look at some of the excess deaths in the U.S. I know that some other countries are experiencing a similar kind of phenomenon. So we're going to read about what some of the possible causes are behind that, and we'll kind of examine some of the fallout from all of these ridiculous COVID lockdowns. All right, let me get me over to where we want to be. We're also going to talk about how Ukraine is corrupt. In other news, water is also wet and the sky is blue. We're going to talk about, if we have time, we'll touch on Dwyane. I think that's how his name pronounced, Dwyane Wade, who will be facing off against his ex-wife in court, who his ex-wife is opposing the transitioning of their 15-year-old child. So we will unpack that. It reminds me a little bit of the James Younger case in Texas. And finally, if we do have time, we will discuss Andrew Tate whining about being in jail. But I really kind of want to hone in on Meghan Markle just standing back and standing by while Prince Harry basically burned his reputation to the ground, despite having reservations about it. And we're going to talk about how that makes her not the ideal wife. So if you're just now joining us, it is in fact 6 o'clock p.m. Here's a little lip balm for you. We are going to get into it in just a minute. The first article we looked at says just 6 extra minutes of physical activity each day boosts brain power in middle age. And I am going to recommend that all of you guys get outside for a walk today, tomorrow, if it's at all nice where you are. Even if it's not, go for like a winter wonderland walk. If it's storming really hard, maybe you can hit the treadmill. Make it happen. 6 minutes is not overwhelming. It's not too much. I recommend it for everyone. All right. Andy says he has a meeting to attend. I'll see y'all on the other side. Oh no, Andy, you won't have a chance to tell us that hackers have been slandered. Oh no, terrible. All right, well, we'll get his scoop on the way out. Let's start with this. Hawley introduces PELOSI Act, banning lawmakers from trading stocks. Senator Josh Hawley, Republican from Missouri, has introduced a bill that would ban members of Congress from trading and owning stocks, using the name of his legislation to take a jab at Representative Nancy Pelosi, Democrat from California, who is very well known for this. Hawley on Tuesday introduced the PELOSI Act, or the Preventing Elected Leaders from Owning Securities and Investments Act. Well, that's actually pretty good. I've heard worse. Renewing a legislative push to curtail stock tradings by lawmakers that's failed over the last few years. I wonder why it's failed, because everyone who's being asked about it is actively insider trading. The GOP senator previously introduced legislation last year seeking to ban lawmakers and their spouses from holding stocks or making new transactions while in office. The Hill has reached out to Pelosi's office for comment. Hawley, like a number of other Republicans, has focused on the former speaker and her family in pushing to ban stock trading by members of Congress. Last year, Pelosi's husband, Paul Pelosi, sold millions of dollars worth of shares of a computer chip maker as the House prepared to vote on a bill focused on domestic chip manufacturing. So he knew about it, and he was invested in this company, so he offloaded all his stocks before the price crashed. Shady, 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 shady. A spokesman for Pelosi said at the time that he sold the shares at a loss. Oh, sure he did. Members of both parties signaled interest in legislation barring stock trades after then-Senator Richard Burr, Republican of North Carolina, who at the time was chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee, unloaded stocks at the onset of the coronavirus pandemic. Yeah, a few instances of that happened for sure. And if I recall correctly, Marjorie Taylor Greene said that something about war being profitable right before the war with Ukraine was announced, I believe. So they are pretty much all in on it, even including people that I like Marjorie Taylor Greene, not Nancy. Along with Hawley's bill, a bipartisan duo in the House has introduced a bill this year on the topic. Representatives Abigail Spanberger, Democrat from Virginia, and Chip Roy, Republican from Texas, introduced the Trust in Congress Act this month, marking the third time the pair have introduced legislation. Good for them. I hope they keep introducing it until something happens, because that's really irritating. There's absolutely no reason for these politicians to be able to do anything like this. It just doesn't make sense to me that this has been able to continue for as long as it has. So I really hope this follows through. We'll be tracking this story as it goes along. Oh boy, in darker news, a Twitter insider reveals the FTC that engineers can access God Mode program and post from any account, and the company has no ability to control who logs into it. If activated, the program in question, tabbed God Mode by staffers for its outsized power, gives any engineer in the company the ability to tweet from any account at their own discretion. That's wild. The program's existence came to light in July 2020 following a high-profile hack that saw a great number of high-profile accounts compromised, masterminded by then 17-year-old Graham Clark. So a 17-year-old was able to hack the whole Twitter company. Crazy to me. The bombshell complaint was reportedly filed with the Federal Trade Commission. Accounts seized by Clark and his cronies included Barack Obama, Jeff Bezos, and Bill Gates, and a then-campaigning Joe Biden. The breach was only made possible by Twitter's secret backdoor tool, which at the time was unknown to the greater public. After the hack, Twitter said that it had taken steps to address any security concerns that may have led to its systems being breached. Now, more than 2 years later, an insider familiar with the inner workings of the San Francisco company contends that it is not the case, according to a new report published Tuesday in the Wall Street Journal that laid bare the new complaint. In it, the unnamed whistleblower alleged that aside from changing the name of the tool from God mode to privileged mode, the company has continued to allow any of its engineers to freely access the application at will. Holy cow. Perhaps most troubling, though, is that the complaint alleges that the Twitter does not have the capability to log which, if any, engineers use or abuse the program, which still gives staffers the ability to take over pages of any of the site's 450 million users. This is something Elon Musk needs to attend to immediately. The whistleblower spoke with the Post on the condition of anonymity due to other employees allegedly being threatened and harassed after airing concerns over the company's security, which the insider said has worsened under the new boss, Elon Musk. Oh, it's terrible. The Post said that by the time they spoke with a source, the insider had already aired their concerns to both the Senate Judiciary Committee and the House Energy and Commerce. Only a few months earlier, Zatko, a 51-year-old celebrity hacker hired by then-CEO Jack Dorsey in late 2020, told the committee in official testimony that the social network was over a decade behind industry security standards, as well as a ticking bomb of security vulnerabilities. Yeah, it doesn't surprise me. Fired from the firm in January of that year, Zatko claims that Twitter has extreme egregious deficiencies in its protections against hackers, saw him reach $7 million settlement with the search giant last September. At the time, Zatko's claims were shot down by Dorsey's recently fired replacement, Parag Agrawal, who was nixed by Musk after the latter's $44 million takeover of the company in October. Here is our 17-year-old antagonist. The hack was masterminded by then 17-year-old Graham Clark, who's currently serving a 3-year sentence for hijacking accounts belonging to Joe Biden, Barack Obama, and others. So he's about to get out, so we can look forward to this happening again, unless they change this. Twitter previously said Zatko was fired for ineffective leadership and poor performance, and that his whistleblower complaint is riddled with inconsistencies and inaccuracies and lacks important context. His settlement was also first reported by the Journal, which reported the former staffer agreed to a non-disclosure agreement that forbids him from speaking publicly about his time at Twitter or disparaging the company. The settlement resolved a dispute about unpaid compensation, but did not prevent him from filing a whistleblower complaint, which he did shortly after reaching the agreement with Twitter, in which he aired similar concerns as the new complainant. Notably, the new complaint was filed in October, immediately after billionaire Musk, 51, purchased the company. So is it possible that this guy has a political axe to grind? Not sure. I'm really curious what happens with this. This is definitely at least something that Elon Musk should know about. He should check it out himself. The complaint contends that even with Musk's arrival, Twitter's practices in regards to security have not been bolstered as previously claimed, and could see the company soon find itself in hot water, much as it did in 2020 after the hack, which was carried out by a group of friends with no links to state or organized crime. Well, that was a nice change of pace, because the next article we're going to look at is going to show the gross, incestuous relationships between the state and big tech. In fact, let's switch over to this now. Spooks in Silicon Valley. Flow of U.S. intelligence analysts into big tech jobs raises alarms. Those who once served to protect the nation are now using their intel smarts to regulate speech in America. That's a very, very generous subtitle. As Congress and the courts delve deeper into federally sanctioned censorship by big tech, a troubling revolving door has emerged between the U.S. intelligence community and the big tech giants on the front lines of one of the fiercest battles over free speech in modern American history. I feel like we saw some of this for sure with the Twitter files. A Just the News review of LinkedIn employment histories of senior big tech executives found that at least 200 former workers of the Central Intelligence Agency, Federal Bureau of Investigation, National Security Agency, National Security Council, and Homeland Security Department have landed Silicon Valley jobs, many within content moderation units regulating supposed disinformation and disproportionately throttling news and opinion deviating from approved left-tilting norms. These individuals range from Aaron Berman, who spent a decade and a half as a CIA analyst before joining Facebook parent Meta as project policy manager for disinformation, to James Baker, the former FBI general counsel recently fired by Elon Musk as Twitter's chief lawyer over a spat about prior review of Twitter files releases exposing past censorship by the platform. Baker was one of the key FBI figures involved in obtaining a FISA warrant based on the now debunked Steele dossier to surveil one-time Trump campaign advisor Carter Page. The Spooks to Silicon Valley pipeline has sent an army of federal agents, intel analysts, and even psychological operations operators, once trained with taxpayer money to fight foreign enemies or capture big criminals, into higher-paying private sector jobs where those same skills now target Americans' opinions in the name of fighting disinformation. None of the former Intel World employees contacted by Just the News returned phone or email requests for comment. Shocking. But in videos posted online, some acknowledge they are part of a new vanguard of big tech censors operating in a world where there is little consensus about what should be done and what is legal. There's very little agreement whether we should be leaving more content up or taking more content down, Berman said in a video posted on Meta's site. Without any particular rule or issue that we're looking at where something has come up, where the rules are not 100% clear, we're not going to make everybody happy. Well, that's an understatement. Berman, whose LinkedIn biography boasts he used to prepare the presidential daily brief at the CIA, acknowledged there is some discomfort between the power he now wields in his new role in big tech to decide the difference between harmful content and free speech. It's a balance, he said in the video. I think it should make me uncomfortable, and all of us who do this work. He's entirely correct. At least he is intellectually honest enough to be able to say that. Some of the federal intel veterans are less inhibited about expressing biases. For example, Nick Rossman, former CIA analyst and current senior manager of trust and safety at Google, overtly supported defeated 2016 presidential candidate Hillary Clinton, said Donald Trump's son-in-law Jared Kushner should be strangled, and declared anti-vaxxers are like Nazis. Holy moly. During the COVID-19 outbreak, Rossman even seemed to wish death on elderly Trump voters, tweeting, "I hope they cough on their grandparents who voted for Trump and get to rot." Wow, what a gem. I'm so glad that this man is in charge of trust and safety at Google. Jacqueline Lepore, another Hillary Clinton supporter and former CIA analyst, she served for 10 years in the agency, is currently Google senior manager, intel collection, and trust and safety. In that capacity, she manages intel operations spanning multiple threat verticals, including violent extremism, cyber threats, misinformation, hate speech, spam, fraud, security and privacy, and more, according to her LinkedIn bio. Wow, so all of these people are so bold that they literally just leave this information up on their LinkedIn profiles. That's wild. In a 2017 Canadian Broadcasting Company interview, Lepore invoked her CIA experience to uncritically vouch for the agency's assessment that Russia meddled in U.S. politics to tip the 2016 election in favor of Donald Trump, saying Russia, deliberately released the DNC information to WikiLeaks with the specific motivation of helping Trump get elected. None of that is true. Absolutely none. Further LinkedIn profile checks revealed several other key members of big tech teams who served in either the Department of Defense, CIA, FBI, NSA, or DHS. The growing pipeline of intelligence and law enforcement officials was previously documented in detail by anonymous Twitter account posted by user nameredacted247 in a 30-part Twitter thread. Interesting. I wonder who was behind that. Former President Donald Trump weighed in on the issues with a video message touting his proposal to end the revolving door between the deep state and tech tyrants by imposing a 7-year cooling off period between any employee of these powerful agencies is allowed to take a job at a major platform. That's actually a really good idea that I would like to see everybody in power endorse. Recent reporting shows the FBI and other rogue agencies have been systematically colluding with former national security officials placed in high positions at Twitter and very likely other companies to advance their censorship regime, said Trump. This anti-American effort, he went on, has been working to silence dissenting opinions on COVID and crucial issues in public health and on the 2020 election. The suppression of dissenting doctors and health experts had nothing to do with science or saving lives, he alleged. This was about government working with powerful corporations to seize power over you, the American people. Trump called on the new Congress to immediately hold hearings and begin issuing subpoenas to investigate the role of the FBI and other federal agencies in censoring lawful speech. Holy cow. Thank goodness that he said this. This definitely needed to be said. People were saying when the Twitter files were coming out that of course they can do this. They're a private company. It's no big deal. And then we started to see the role that the government was playing in pushing these big tech platforms to censor people. And the argument from the left kind of had to shift. I forget how they did it exactly, but it became very clear that the US government was using these big tech platforms to silence people. And it seems that even the people, once they leave these official positions, they are still in the mindset of censoring the American people for the purpose of political gains. And that's a serious issue that needs to be addressed before we can actually solve the problems that we're facing with these big tech giants. Let's see what you guys are thinking. And then we'll see what we're going to talk about next. I just found that article particularly distressing, but not at all surprising. I feel like we should certainly expect more of it as we go on. Pelosi Act, perfect name. Somebody says it's so cold outside. It is cold. I would recommend maybe walking on a treadmill, doing some Pilates in the living room. I like to do it with dip. Anytime I'm doing something, I like to involve the cat. How apropos, the Pelosi Act. Bummer, I can't watch for long tonight, going live at 7 with Daily Wire Friends podcast. Definitely going to be talking crowd if anyone wants to tune in when Lydia is done. Yeah, have fun over there. Sounds like a good time. Congratulations, the channel is growing. Lydia is literally the only voice I can listen to through deafening tinnitus without getting headaches. I'm very happy to hear that. I like to be the calm voice of reason. I'm very sorry about your tinnitus. I really hope that they're able to find something to help you. Sour Patch Lip Balm. Yes, that is the name of the brand I use. Just kidding. I just forgot to put on before I started. Stevie says, hi, hope everyone's having a nice day. We are indeed. Great day. YouTube won't let me send links in chat. That's correct. You can't really send links in chat, unfortunately. Only mods can link. 1 second, Sun Yi, I'll grab it. So maybe you guys can at least copy and paste. Yes, Daily Wire and Friends. I bet you a nickel that if you looked that up in YouTube, you'd be able to find it. It's got the Daily Wire logo and Friends logo mashed together. If that helps the landmark. God mode might have been why Twitter was weird yesterday. They might have been fixing it. Yeah, I saw that Twitter was weird yesterday. It kept telling me that my tweets weren't sending, but people were interacting with them. So they were appearing as drafts. You know, when things fail to send, they just turn up as drafts. It was doing that for a while. I don't really care. I'm not entitled to Twitter working perfectly. It's not the end of the world. I know they're doing new stuff over there, so it's not that big a deal. How to tell you can't trust someone. They have the word trust in their job title. That is a great rule of thumb, Stevie, and I am inclined to agree. Don't forget to smash the like button. The algorithm can find more people to send over. That's correct. I forgot to pin my comment about patching the like button. So let me do that now. Patch the like button and share with friends. There we go. And I'm going to pin that so you guys can all see it. Cool beans. All right, let's move on. I really want to talk, since we're kind of talking about hacking and stuff, I want to talk about Kristi Noem and her latest allegation. South Dakota Governor Kristi Noem says her cell phone was hacked and blames the January 6th committee after her personal information, including social security number, was mishandled. That is putting it lightly. They just full on leaked it out into the public without a care in the world, knowing that no one would ever hold them accountable for it. Kristi Noem's personal cell phone was hacked and used to make hoax calls, her office announced on Monday. The breach, the South Dakota governor alleges, was due to the January 6th Select Committee's mishandling of her personal information, and nothing would surprise me less. Noem, 51, is calling on Attorney General Merrick Garland as well as several congressional committees to investigate the leak of not just her cell phone number, but also of her family's personal information like social security numbers. Absolutely unconscionable. Nobody should feel that their social security number is going to be leaked no matter what side of the aisle they're on. That's absolutely insane. The hack of the GOP governor's personal cell phone comes after the January 6th panel last year released White House visitor logs from Donald Trump's presidency, which had included the unredacted personal information Noem is referencing. Yeah, here she is with her family. Noem said social security numbers of herself, husband, 3 children, and son-in-law were all compromised when December 2021 visitor logs from the White House were released by the January 6 panel last month. Callous mishandling of personal information has real-world consequences, Governor Noem said of the hack. If you get such a phone call from my number, know that I had no involvement. I feel bad for her because that's uncool. These things happen to pretty much everyone, it feels like, and it's not cool when it happens to any of us. I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy. It's a horrible feeling. And knowing that it's out of your control makes it even worse. Wondering if it was your fault. Sometimes it is partly your fault because you didn't know what you were getting into. I've urged both the United States Attorney General and multiple congressional committees to investigate the leaking of my family's personal information, and I look forward to whatever resolution they can provide. I doubt they're going to provide any kind of useful information for Mrs. Noem and her family. I'm beginning to suspect that the Department of Justice is completely biased. I think that Merrick Garland is probably the worst person for the job, but we're going to look at some examples of where he can show himself to be impartial, but in a minute. Noem, her husband, their 3 children, and their son-in-law's social security numbers were included in the leak. Other high-profile officials also had their information released. This includes Texas Governor Greg Abbott, South Carolina Governor Henry McMaster, former Housing and Urban Development Secretary Ben Carson, and former Health and Human Services Secretary Alex Azar. The January 6th Select Committee released its conclusions at the end of 2022 as the GOP prepared to take control of the House, which would ultimately lead to the panel's dissolution. 2 Republicans were on the 9-member panel but are no longer in Congress. That would be Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger, both terrible, not truly Republicans, in no way conservative. Former Wyoming Representative Liz Cheney was primaried by Trump-backed Harriet Hagerman for the state's at-large House seat, while Illinois former Representative Adam Kinzinger opted not to run for re-election and, if I recall correctly, was redistricted out of existence. At the end of the 117th Congress, the panel recommended a series of criminal referrals to the Justice Department and ethics investigations to House committees. Nothing is going to happen because of the January 6th committee. Absolutely nothing. Much as Adam Kinzinger has been touting it, he wrote a book about it. He signed those books. They did not sell very well. People aren't interested in something that happened almost 3 years ago. Was it 3 years ago? Over 3 years ago? I don't remember at this point. I don't remember. I think it was the first month of 2021 that this took place. Yeah, because the 2020 election happened in November. This is just a couple months later. So let's read about what's going on with the Democrats, since that's kind of what's going on with the Republicans. Joe Manchin is not on Joe Biden's side. It couldn't get any worse. Manchin leads Democrats turning against Biden for the classified documents debacle and demanding to know what the hell happened. It's a very reasonable question. The grumbling from members of President Joe Biden's own party erupted into full-throated criticism on Monday evening as Senator Joe Manchin led the charges in condemning the president's handling of classified documents. It couldn't get any worse, he told Politico. Last Thursday, Biden played down the scandal, saying he had, quote, no regrets. Crazy to me. Yet on Saturday, it emerged that FBI agents spent 13 hours searching his Delaware home and found yet another collection of classified documents. Oh, here we have the timeline. This is absolutely insane. Oh my gosh. It adds to the sense of a crisis that begins a new chapter every day and deepens the self-inflicted wounds for the Democratic Party. On Tuesday, Emerson College published a 2024 presidential poll that showed Donald Trump had opened a 3-point lead over Biden, reversing their November positions. After positive midterm results and improving news on inflation and gas prices, the scandal has given Republicans a chance to fight back and neutralize Democratic attacks on Donald Trump's handling of his own documents scandal. On Tuesday, it also emerged that classified documents had been found at former Vice President Mike Pence's home, and we'll go over those as well because we're going to cover all of this. Democratic griping intensified at the weekend and grew even louder on Monday as senators returned from recess. Senator Jon Tester, who faces a tricky re-election next year, told The Hill, I'm very concerned. We have to get to the bottom of it and find out what the hell happened, why it happened. Here's our 2024 matchup. Biden 41%, Trump 44%. Someone else 10%, undecided 4%. While the likes of Manchin has long been a thorn in Biden's side, more reliable voices also joined the chorus. While the likes of Manchin I would say while the likes of Manchin have long been a thorn in Biden's side. Senator Mark Kelly told Politico simply, "I don't think any classified documents should be at somebody's house." Duh. And Senate Judiciary Chairman Dick Durbin said the White House's handling of classified information was in sharp contrast to the way it was done in Congress. "I hope they found them all," he added. This is the first time, as I think I said yesterday, I've ever agreed with Dick Durbin. Like other Democrats, he had said Biden had done a better job working with the authorities than Trump. He's done well by cooperating every step of the way, unlike Trump, but still has the documents that I don't understand why he'd have in his personal possession, he said. Yeah, 100%. The drip nature of the revelations has left allies wondering when it will end and when the next discovery is coming. The Biden administration, which championed its commitment to transparency when it took office, has had to fend off questions every day. As fallout from the crisis deepens, there was some good news for Biden in the Emerson College poll. His overall approval rating was up 5 points from November. It now stands at 44%. Oh, good for him. Americans are not a smart people. For his approval rating to be at 44% is honestly super embarrassing. Spencer Kimball, executive director of Emerson College Polling, said President Biden rebounded with independent voters this month. His 29% approval among independents in November increased to 38% this January. Oh, that's terrible. His approval also increased 9 points among college graduates, of whom 42% approve of Biden in November, now 51% in January. Further proof that higher education at this point in time is a complete scam. Emerson College posted 1,015 registered voters from January 19th to 21st, giving a 3-point margin of error. Fascinating. So, yeah, I agree with Joe Manchin. It couldn't get any worse, especially as Ted Cruz is joining the chorus calling for justice for Joe Biden. Cruz demands federal investigators search Biden documents stored at the University of Delaware. Cruz said the university presumably does not store the documents in a secure location. GOP Senator Ted Cruz is asking the Justice Department to search President Joe Biden's records from the time he was a senator that have been stored at the University of Delaware to see whether they contain more classified documents. An FBI search of Biden's home Friday found classified documents from his time as vice president and senator, marking the fifth time classified materials have been discovered in his possession since November. On an episode released Monday of his podcast Verdict with Ted Cruz, which is also with Michael Knowles from the Daily Wire, the senator said that the next step in this scandal will be finding how many more classified documents are illegally in his Senate papers. He also said the University of Delaware has more than 1,800 boxes of records from Joe Biden's Senate tenure, which he gave to the university. Cruz said the university presumably does not store the documents in a secure location. If you recall, part of Trump's argument for his own innocence in the matter of his personal possession of classified documents was that his files were stored in a locked compartment. They were secured. He had even talked to, I believe, the FBI about the process of securing them to make sure that nothing would happen to them. Still wasn't enough. They still came after him. They still kicked in his door. It was crazy. But I think that Cruz might be onto something here, and I fully agree that we need to have many more investigations. And here's the Pence issue. Former VP Pence informs Congress he has discovered documents in Indiana home marked classified. The Justice Department will make the final decision on whether the records are classified, Pence's team said. So it sounds like he went right to the feds and told them that he found something that he shouldn't have had in his home. Former VP Mike Pence informed Congress on Tuesday that his team had discovered documents at his Indiana home that were from his time in the Trump White House and marked as classified. Pence said his team last week searched his Carmel, Indiana home and the office of the political advocacy group Advancing American Freedom after news broke that President Joe Biden stored classified documents in his home and office from his time as vice president, Fox News reported. Pence told the National Archives on January 18th about some potentially classified materials discovered in 2 small boxes. The Federal Records Agency then informed the FBI, which collected the documents the following evening while Pence was in Washington, D.C. to attend the March for Life. The Justice Department will make the final decision whether the records are classified, Pence's team said. It's just kind of an interesting aside. I don't know if Joe Biden meant any ill will by having these files in his possession. It sure doesn't seem straightforward. I was told when he was elected that there would be no malarkey moving forward, and so far that has been an absolute lie. Truly, utterly embarrassing to every conceivable degree. And this has been the most malarkey I have ever seen from any president of the United States at any point. So, really curious what comes from this. I'm honestly curious if they're going to come up with even more documents from him. And I'm curious if they'll ever tell us what was actually in these documents, because I don't know if you guys recall this, but there was a short time after Trump's door was kicked in that they were telling us that he had nuclear codes and all of this other crazy stuff that then turned out to just be completely false. So I really don't know what to expect as far as this stuff goes. Hopefully it's nothing serious. But again, we have no way of knowing. And since it was technically all classified, we might not ever know, which is kind of really irritating. All right, let's see what you guys are thinking. Best way to end ex-Intel agents from accessing or current Intel agencies from contacting them is to yank their security clearances. The president, Trump, is the first thing needs done. I completely agree. Trust and safety should be named the STFU PORS Committee, 100%. Lids, is your super chat not working? It works on other feeds. It should be working. People don't super chat me a lot, so I don't often see it. I got 2 last night, and somebody was saying they were trying to send it and weren't able to do so. Let me see if I can send. Oh, cool. You can start a Q&A. That's fascinating. Oh, cool. Those are some fun toys. It doesn't look like I can super chat myself, which does not surprise me at all. I'll have to troubleshoot it after the show tonight, maybe with a test stream. Nobody wants to impeach Brandon yet, eh? I don't know if anybody's going to want to impeach him. I do know that they were trying to impeach him for the 3rd time or use the 25th Amendment against Biden, Trump, so that he couldn't run again. But no word on that from the Republicans. I guess we'll see if they change their minds. I'm out. Got to get ready to tune into Daily Wire Friends. Have fun with the rest of the stream and have a great night, Lydia. Thank you, Bree. You have fun over on Daily Wire Friends. LMFAO, maybe because he does business with China, that's why he has the documents. Yes, I'm aware that he does business with China. I'm just saying that I'm not sure if he knew what he was doing at the time, because based on his recent behavior, I'm pretty sure that he has some pretty bad dementia, and I worked with people who had dementia. And this is actually an excuse that they're using, was that he wasn't sure what he was doing when these files went missing. So it's very likely that he knew exactly what he had. He had information about Ukraine, Iran, and the UK, if I recall correctly, which to me just is insanely incriminating, because if China wanted any of that information, there's no reason to suspect that Hunter Biden wouldn't have happily sold it to them. Somebody cleared up too. Somebody pointed out, I think it was Luke Rosiak, the reason that Hunter Biden was paying as much in rent as he supposedly was because apparently those were the rental expenditures of his entire office. So it's not like a living expenditure, which should only cost less than like $3,000 a month, but it was for like everything. So that's a reason, I guess, that it might possibly cost that much. I could see renting a very large building for that much. Kind of surprising that it would be connected to the house. I just don't know. I would need to see more information about that. Joe being Joe, sad face, honestly. Seriously, how can they say that Trump didn't cooperate? Am I missing something? Yeah, for sure. I don't know why they're saying that, because from my understanding, in fact, let's look this up now. Trump cooperated with FBI over about classified document security. Let's see what we find. You guys are going to research this with me. Classified documents get misplaced all the time, says just security. Okay. Everything of Trump's knowledge and involvement. DOJ says Trump team may have hidden or moved classified documents. Fascinating. How the government tries to prevent classified documents. All the president's classified documents. Interesting. Timeline of FBI investigation of Trump's handling of... Trump worker told FBI about moving Mar-a-Lago boxes on ex-president's orders. Okay, that's not very interesting, Washington Post. Give me something more interesting. All right, here we are all speculating about how Trump had stolen the nuclear codes and other such nonsense. I wanted to know about the FBI talking to Trump about this before it actually happened. So if you guys have a link to an article that talks about that, I'm very curious what happened there, because my understanding was that they came in and they coordinated with Trump to try to keep this stuff secure, and then later came back and acted like he was a criminal and bust down his door and everything and made a huge deal out of it. And I think CNN was on the scene or whatever, just like they were at the Roger Stone arrest. Absolutely crazy, ridiculous political drama. Trump's were under lock and key, were they not? That is my understanding. That certainly is my understanding. Whereas, Biden's were stuck in a box in his garage. The box that everybody's like, oh my gosh, you can see it in this video he did with his Corvette. I'm not convinced that those were the actual boxes. They were probably further back in the garage. But again, it makes no difference. They're in a garage. A garage is easily... it's easily hacked. Basically, you can get into a garage door pretty straightforwardly with a little toy that can jam the signals or whatever. I'm not a hacker. I don't know. We don't have Andy around to correct us. Let's read about this one, because I haven't heard people talk a lot about this. TSA's no-fly list is leaked. 1.5 million entries were found on an unsecured server, and it includes Russian arms dealer Viktor Bout, whom I don't know if you guys recall, we traded for the tall lesbian and WNBA player a couple months ago, IRA members, and names of Middle Eastern descent. Oh my, that sounds biased. A Swedish hacker accessed the TSA's no-fly list due to an unprotected server. Genius. There are geniuses at the head of our government in every organization. The list contains 1.5 million rows of data along with names and birth dates. Holy cow. A copy of the Transportation Security Administration's no-fly list, which contains 1.5 million entries, was leaked online after a Swedish hacker discovered it on an unprotected server. Fascinating. So why did they have this on an unprotected server? That's my first question. What were they thinking would happen here? How did they possibly think that this could end well? At first reported on by the Daily Dot, the list includes names of potential IRA members, many of Middle Eastern descent, and the recently freed Russian arms dealer Viktor Bout, among others. The hacker, who goes by the name Crime W, shared on their blog that the list is indeed a copy of the no-fly list from 2019 and includes airline employee names, addresses, passport numbers, and pilot license numbers. Holy cow. A TSA spokesperson told DailyMail.com that the organization is aware of a potential cybersecurity incident and is collecting questions about the leak to answer at some point shortly. Any day now, TSA. I don't know if you guys know this, but they're not actually a government organization, TSA. I don't believe so. Actually, I remember learning about that and then later, immediately later, learned that they actually were bought by a wing of the U.S. government. Not sure who they answer to now. The no-fly list includes names of known or suspected terrorists who are banned from flying to or in the U.S. The screening program grew out of the September 11, 2001 terrorist attacks and involved airlines comparing their passenger records with federal data to keep dangerous people off planes. However, the list has shrunk over the years. Yeah, we're only at 1.5 million people on there. Holy cow. The server is run by Commute Air, which is why there were nearly 1,000 employees shown in the trove of data. Eric Kane, corporate communications manager for Commute Air, said that there was a misconfiguration which caused the server to be exposed. Oh, Eric, he had a very bad day. The researcher accessed files including the outdated 2019 version of the federal no-fly list that included first and last names and date of birth, Kane said in a statement. Additionally, through information found on the server, the researcher discovered access to a database containing personal identifiable information of Commute Air employees. That is not cool. Crime W shared a blog about their discovery, which they made while scrolling through specialized search engine Shodan, which lets people see through servers connected to the internet. And the hacker notes it was through their boredom that they uncovered the TSA's no-fly list. Hard-coded credentials there would allow me access to NavBlue APIs for refueling, canceling, and updating flights, swapping out crew members, and so on, the post reads. News of the leak surfaced Friday, which sparked U.S. officials to weigh in on the breach. Republican Congressman Dan Bishop shared in a tweet, "Besides the fact that the list is a civil liberties nightmare, how is this info so easily accessible? We will be coming for answers." Good. Maya Arson, okay, yeah, Crime W, interesting. "Me and Bingle on our way to get interviewed." Yeah, I'm sure they are. I'm sure this person's very popular now. The hacker, who goes by Crime W, pictured, shared on their blog that the list is indeed a copy of the no-fly list from 2019. Major airports including JFK, LAX, Miami, and Atlanta all had issues 2 days after the computer meltdown, with experts fearing it may continue into the weekend. The FAA confirmed on January 20th that a computer glitch caused by a contractor mistakenly deleting files brought America's airspace to a standstill last week for the first time since 9/11, but has not named the culprit. A preliminary report showed the contract personnel unintentionally deleted files while working to correct synchronization between the live primary database and a backup database, the FAA said. The investigation is ongoing, but the agency said it has not yet found any evidence linking the incident to malicious intent or cyber attack. Dan Bishop is entirely correct. The no-fly list is an incredible violation of civil rights. What you are suspected of doing or having done should have absolutely no bearing on your ability to move about the country. And that involves planes, that involves renting cars, that involves buying cars, that involves just being generally able to get around. That is such a violation of the human freedom to move and do things. This is something that the U.S. has traditionally respected, but I see it's falling apart in the wake of 9/11. I knew that the 9/11 thing was going to be a disaster for civil liberties as soon as the Patriot Act came out, and I was like, well, wait, what is preventing them from just saying that, oh, by the way, you're a terrorist, you're not allowed to do anything anymore? And it turned out I was correct. Unfortunately, it would be very nice to be right about something that's not abjectly horrible. Speaking of abjectly horrible, let's look at this. Was it worth it? America has suffered 300,000 non-COVID excess deaths since 2020. Sorry, this doesn't fit very well on the screen. And as experts blame lockdowns and delayed healthcare for a spike in drug overdoses and firearm fatalities. The U.S. has suffered nearly 300,000 more deaths than usual in the past 3 years of the pandemic, which is being attributed to COVID, with researchers blaming lockdowns and delays to healthcare. I'm going to zoom out a little bit so you guys can see this. There we go. That cannot be attributed to COVID, with researchers blaming lockdowns and delays to healthcare. The latest official data shows that there were 1.26 million excess deaths between February 2020 and the end of 2022, of which around 295,000 did not have COVID on their death certificates. These are mostly made up of surges in deaths from cancer, heart disease, drug overdoses, and firearms over the past 3 years. None of this surprises me. We shut everything down, and hospitals started prioritizing COVID treatment because it paid more money. This was my understanding, and you can look at a list of what each state got for treating each COVID patient. The number that really stood out to me was West Virginia received something like almost $500,000, $425,000 per COVID patient they treated. And it makes perfect sense that then hospitals were like, oh gosh, well, we can't treat anybody else. And we're locked down for your safety. So you won't be able to get your cancer screenings either. We won't be able to take care of your cardiac issues. And we also won't be able to treat you for drug addiction, which was something that we did a lot in the cardiac unit that I used to work at. And also firearms over the past 3 years. I'm not sure about that. You guys should tell me why you think firearms deaths spiked over the past 3 years. Dr. Steve Hanke, an economist at Johns Hopkins University in Baltimore, Maryland, told DailyMail.com that the lockdowns have devastating economic effects with little benefits to the nation's overall health. Dr. Cody Wing is a health policy expert from Indiana University, told DailyMail.com that these pandemic mandates kept people who needed care the most away from the doctor's office, potentially costing thousands of lives. Yes, and I think that we are going to see the fallout from the COVID lockdowns probably for the next 25 to 50 years. No exaggeration. You guys hopefully can prove me wrong. I always predict the wrong things, so hopefully I am inaccurate once again. A lot of different countries have seen this kind of spike, though. Weekly increases in deaths. Sweden, US, UK, Spain, and Canada all saw increases in deaths. I believe that these were not attributed to COVID, but it doesn't say. Let's look at the gallery and see if this gives us more data. Sometimes the pictures do. Okay, so this is the doctor. Total predicted number of excess deaths since 2/1/2020 by state. California has suffered the most excess death from reasons other than COVID, despite its strict pandemic lockdown and mask orders. Yeah. The lockdown made life so much worse in so many ways. Like it's not even close. And I wonder if we'll ever really truly come to terms with what we did with the lockdown. It was so slipshod, and there are people out there who still say that we never fully locked down. Well, I'm darn glad we didn't, because you can see the way that it worked out with just the half-assed job that we did with our American lockdown. Excess mortality, cumulative number of deaths from all causes compared to projection based on previous years per million people, January 1st, 2023. Wow. So Russia is really high. Mexico is also high. A lot of these small countries are high. And then a lot of them also, there's no data. Like most of Africa has no data. India and some of those other countries. Australia had lesser ones. Interesting. The US recorded more excess deaths than much of Western Europe, including Sweden, despite the country's lockdown orders early in the COVID-19 pandemic. Yeah, so Sweden had very, 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 very light lockdown orders, and they lifted them relatively early. And that was really a kind of interesting case study to look at how they responded to COVID and what their COVID mortality ended up being. Weekly deaths due to all causes. The CDC reports 1.2 million excess deaths since the COVID-19 pandemic began, and while a majority can be attributed to COVID, there were also increases in deaths from chronic disease, substance abuse, homicides, and accidents. Yeah, not surprising at all. Although, again, I'm not so sure about accidents. Hopefully, all you guys can illuminate me. Hello all evening. Sorry I'm late, says John. Welcome to the stream. John, we're having a great time talking about death right now. Unfortunately, we're just talking about the excess deaths that are not chalked up to COVID. That is crazy to me. Let me see what their conclusion is, although the Daily Mail isn't so great about doing conclusions. Yeah. U.S. life expectancy crashes to the lowest rate since 1996 amid fentanyl epidemic and COVID hangover. Interesting way of putting it. Life expectancy at birth is now 76.4 years. It's lowest in 25 years than when it was 76.1. COVID was the third leading cause of death in 2021 for the second year in a row. Unintentional injuries, including drug overdoses, was the fourth leading cause. Terrible. At birth, both sexes. Wow, yeah, this has really come down. Terribly sad. So I have a question for you guys, because I know people who work very hard on their longevity, and I know that longevity is really a big goal for most people. And I'm just going to ask this question because I don't really want to jump right into talking about Meghan Markle being a horrible wife. And I wanted to get you guys' view on this because I have kind of an unusual take, I think. When it comes to death, I'm not afraid of dying. I don't know what happens after we die. I am not religious. I haven't been Christian since I haven't considered myself Christian since I was probably about 10 years old. But I was raised in that background. I know all about it. I consider myself agnostic because I just don't know. And I don't consider myself arrogant enough to say that God definitely does or definitely does not exist. I do appreciate the important religious structure and how it's kind of made the Western society possible. But I don't really want to live to be very old. And part of the reason I don't want to live to be very old is because I've taken care of people who were very, very old. I took care of a gentleman who was 106. He was wonderful, charming, pleasant, deaf as a post, and all he ever did was sleep. And his quality of life was such that he didn't know where he was. He didn't know what he was doing. He just was a very easygoing person who didn't make a fuss. And he was a very unusual instance because he still was relatively happy with his life, even though his knees basically didn't work at all. But he lived in a nursing home. That was where I worked, and no one ever came to visit him. I also took care of a lady who was over 100 years old, and she was a little more outspoken. She could hear a lot better than the gentleman, and she told me that she hurt all the time Every single one of her joints hurt all the time. Every single muscle in her body hurt. Her skin was so frail that you could tear it just by changing her shirt. She was constantly cold. She was constantly in pain. She couldn't stand, walk, or see anymore. She could barely hear. She had a daughter who came and visited her, but she lived her life knowing that the rest of her family was far too busy to ever go see great-great-grandma. Not sure how many generations she had, but her daughter was probably in her 70s, approaching 80s. So she clearly had a very large family, and her daughter was the only one who ever came to see her. She had pictures of them, but she never saw them in person. She didn't know what was going on in their lives because she didn't really use technology. She didn't even really have a cell phone that she used reliably. And I was very saddened by watching this lady live the last days of her life knowing that she was all alone. She told me straight to my face that all her friends had died. Her husband had died. Everybody that she really cared about most in her life and had built her life with was gone. Either they did not have time or they had all died. And that made me really sad. And it made me really think hard about how long I want to live and what I want to do to extend my life. So at the end of the day, I decided I would like to live to probably be about 75 or 80 if possible. People complain about getting old, but old is what you get if you're lucky. But at the same time, you don't want to get too old. You really don't. I personally don't really want to live to be 100 or 90 or even or like 95, anything like that. Although I probably won't because MS shaves a few years off your life anyway you slice it. So probably not something that I'm going to really have to worry about. But I was thinking about it too because I know some people who choose not to eat red meat and choose to eat meat substitutes instead because it supposedly helps to extend your lifespan. And I was thinking about it while I was making dinner the other night because, of course, it had meat in it. And I was thinking, is it really worth it to get to 100 if you lose out on life's little pleasures like eating the occasional steak, chicken, and other red meat and stuff like that? I don't know. I'm curious what you guys think. I'm always prepared to die. I always try to make sure to kiss my husband before I leave and make sure I leave nothing unsaid and make sure that everything is resolved with him before I go anywhere or do anything. And, you know, if you die in your sleep, you want to know for sure that you were at peace with your spouse and with everybody in your life. So I always try to attain that. It's not always possible, but you got to do your best. But I'm curious what you guys think. Let me read your comments real quick. Lids is the only media chat I trust. That's correct. We have the best chat over here. The countries with the largest hand in the game in Ukraine were the countries that locked down the hardest. Coincidence? Possibly. I'm pretty sure TSA is run through Homeland Security. Yeah, okay, that's who I think they work with as well. When I was in the psych ward, there was a man trying to kill himself because he did not want to live in an old body. That is a terrible position to be in too. You should not be in the position where you feel like you should end your life for reasons outside of your control. You should always come to terms with your condition. Oh, we have a super chat here. All right, this is from Kevin Ovenen. Lots of Kanye fans in Tim's chat last night. I had to take screenshots on my phone just to read how much I am disliked in this alleged Big Tent party. I see you noticed too. Yes, in the Timcast IRL chat the other night, there was a lot of anti-Semitism, and I saw a lot of it while I was over there, which always kind of puzzled me because we never espoused any kind of anti-Semitism on the show itself. We never hosted anybody who held those views openly during my tenure there, and with very good reason, even though I was constantly harassed by a certain person's followers and fanboys. I really don't like that. I really hate the idea of judging an entire group of people for anything that's happened in the past. And I am saying anything. I don't like the idea of judging a single individual based on the whatever their group has done in the past. And you can have the debate about what the group's done in the past, but at the end of the day, when you're looking at the person in front of you, you need to judge them based on their actions and their actions alone. And I think that's fully fair, best way to think about it. Psycho Clown says, my wife's grandfather lived to be 96 years old and worked construction jobs till the last year of his life. That's impressive. He would outwork 90% of people well through his 90s. I hear what you're saying, but it's not all bad. Your wife's grandfather was exceedingly rare. Part of the problem is that people retire and then they just have like 30 years. And they say that death is most common in people who have recently retired because they get done working and they're just like, well, now what do I do? Well, nothing. Society doesn't have anything you need to do. And it's said that people who live the longest often have responsibilities that they have to fulfill even after they retire. And I think that's such a good idea because it's so meaningful for young kids to have responsibilities, and it's so meaningful for adults to have fixed responsibilities. That's what a lot of my generation are missing right now, is these responsibilities. So they're just floating through life, streaming videos and eating takeout, and they just have no greater purpose. And then when you get older, when you retire, when you don't have to do work anymore, you still need to have some higher purpose that you're working toward. Death would be a great adventure. Let me finish here first. I think that's a good way to look at it. Older people at church make themselves indispensable by becoming prayer warriors. Knowing someone is praying for me brings great comfort. It keeps them involved in other people's lives. That's great too. I think that's a great way to keep that responsibility in play. I think that you absolutely have to make sure that you're working for other people. And Matt Walsh pushes the idea that all men need to adopt some kind of fatherhood in their life in some capacity. And I was thinking about it and I was like, you know what? I think he's entirely correct. I think that he is referring to the male-specific version of servant leadership, which is something that Jocko Willink talks about a lot, if you guys follow him at all. And I think servant leadership is really the key to finding actual meaning as you try to move through life. So let's talk about this one thing real fast before we wrap up. Meghan had, quote, gentle concerns about Prince Harry's memoirs, but, quote, stayed in the shadows, closed quote, as he sparked media storm with U.S. publicity blitz. Duchess of Sussex may have expressed worries that Spare could ruffle feathers. Meghan has been notably absent from any of Harry's promotions and interviews. A source said, is this the way she would have approached things? Possibly not. Interesting. Meghan Markle raised gentle concern about Prince Harry's decision to release Spare and was worried that if it was the right move, it was claimed today. Oh, it was claimed today. Okay. As the Duke of Sussex memoirs hit the couple's popularity on both sides of the Atlantic, his wife is said to have expressed concerns that it could ruffle feathers. Of course. The royal couple are known for putting on a united front, including during the incendiary interview with Oprah Winfrey in March 2021, which none of us here care about. We fought a war, so we didn't have to care about these people. My greater message here is that if Meghan Markle had concerns about her husband releasing this book because it could ruffle feathers, I think that she is a bad wife for not telling him her concerns and forcing him to take them seriously. Because part of the most significant part of a wife's role is to hold her husband accountable and make sure that he knows if he's going off the rails in any capacity. And I understand that this book has sold well. It's been one of the fastest selling books, I think, in history, which is crazy to me because I personally don't know a single person who's bought it. But apparently somebody is. So somebody is really interested in what he has to say, which, fine, that's okay. If you want to tell your story, admittedly your self-indulgent, narcissistic, closed-minded, spoiled, selfish story, in my view, because Ben Shapiro spoke to this as well. And this has actually raised an interesting conversation between me and Andy about the value of therapy. I was reading an article last night about how 50%, I'm going to see if I can pull this up now. It's from EV Magazine, which I really like. 50% of liberal women are in therapy. And I was like, well, this is not working. This is a ladies' magazine. Liberal woman. Let me see. There you go. Over 50% of liberal white women under 30 have a mental health issue. Are we worried yet? A 2020 Pew Research study reveals that over half of white liberal women have been diagnosed with mental health condition at some point. Does this mean there's a correlation between progressive ideas and mental health? It's a common tactic of the politically charged on either side and normally perceived as a cheap one at that, to take the particular adherence of an ideology and equate that diehard worship to mental illness. That's true. Conservatives label younger liberal generations as snowflakes or as having Trump derangement syndrome if they didn't like the past president. Liberals and progressives label right-leaning individuals or conservatives as racists, bigots, misogynists, etc. Resorting to this type of lowbrow behavior might once have been seen as an excuse not to address the actual issues or beliefs at hand, but now ad hominem attacks are more common than not. But what if what was once a cheap shot or a personal insult has actually been found to bear scientific correlation between the individuals who hold progressive ideologies and an increasing risk of mental illness? That's exactly what Pew Research has found. And all politics aside, the shocking diagnosis of over 50% of liberal women with some form of mental health medical diagnosis is a public health concern that no one seems to be discussing, let alone taking seriously. And it's true. And I know they're looking at younger women in this study, but the fact of the matter is that once women approach middle age and older, their dependence on antidepressants seems to skyrocket. For whatever reason, we're not talking about the risk of mental illness women in general face, especially compared to men. Women are 40% more likely to develop depression than men. Due to lower levels of serotonin, we're also more likely to have more anxiety and depression because of that deficiency. There are also certain life experiences like childbirth, which can lead to these diagnoses. 1 in 7 women will be diagnosed with postpartum depression in the year following childbirth. Postpartum depression in particular is a condition that leaves the victims feeling powerless and without confidence or assurance in their own abilities as a mother or caregiver. Many women with postpartum depression describe feeling like failures. Conditions like depression and anxiety thrive in silence, but there also seem to be a lack of confidence in women when it comes to knowing our own bodies, and instead our mental problems are written off as being too overly emotional. Think about how many times someone has described you or another woman as emotional. While hormones do obviously play a role in the development of mental health, for better or for worse, it's possible to minimize or downplay the risks our mental health is facing if they're written off as hormonal issues, whether it's our medical professionals or even ourselves engaging in that mindset. But biology and hormones aside, what about the choices we actively engage in? The behaviors we indulge in, the beliefs and convictions we hold as more important than all the others. The people we spend our time with, the actions we devote our energy to, and the news we consume. Is that negatively impacting our mental health or even more importantly, leading to medical diagnoses? Here's what the study found. The study in question, which by the way is not from a news source or media outlet, but Pew Research for heaven's sake, is, when all is said and done, pretty damning. Interestingly enough, the study, which is titled Pew American Trends Panel Wave 64, was dated March 2020, over a year ago. Yet it took a PhD candidate in political science posting about the study on Twitter for it to garner even a smidge of attention. He clarifies that the Pew panel survey issued a negative mental health symptoms battery in a subsequent wave 1 month later. The study, which examined white liberals, moderates, and conservatives, both male and female, found that conservatives were far less likely to be diagnosed with mental health issues than those who identified as either liberal or even very liberal. What's more, white women suffered the worst of all. White women ages 18 to 29 who identified as liberal were given a mental health diagnosis from medical professionals at a rate of 56.3%, as compared to 28.4% in moderates and 27.3% in conservatives. Zach Goldberg, the doctoral candidate in question, consolidated the study's info into a set of visuals and posted them to a thread on Twitter, but it's important to note that he clarified the following. I didn't write this thread to mock white liberals or their apparently disproportionate rates of mental illness, and you shouldn't either. I completely agree with him on this point. I think that it's one thing to call your political opponents crazy, and it's another to understand that human suffering is such that people of a certain group may be predisposed to mental health issues, and that's something you need to keep in mind even as you're arguing with them. I think that we need to be compassionate even as we're going to bat against these people. And all this isn't to say necessarily that Meghan Markle is at risk of a mental health disorder, but one of the things that Harry talked about in his book was the fact that his brother encouraged him to seek therapy. And now, after the fact, now that Harry has attended therapy religiously for most of his adult life, I think, his brother, William, is saying that he thinks that he was deceived by what he learned in therapy. This has been my stance. Andy thinks it's probably a positive. I'm not so convinced. Andy, of course, also thinks that higher education is a net positive. He's probably right, but I look at the way higher education is right now, and I just can't help thinking that it's totally lost. We've lost everything good. And Andy points out that Jordan Peterson was a psychiatric counselor, I believe. He was a therapist of some kind, and there's certainly value in what Peterson has to say. But I think that because of the way higher education is, I strongly suspect that these therapists have a very tilted stance, to the point that even if these horribly depressed white women choose to go to therapy, they're going to be given nothing helpful and more of the same horrible ideology that's put them in part in the position that they're in at this point. Anyway, I think it is very sad that white women are at risk for this so much, especially liberal women. I wish that I could help illuminate these women to some of the things that might possibly help make them happier, like putting themselves in a position of servanthood instead of constantly trying to put themselves first, and the idea of having children, very valuable for some of these younger ladies. And I think that's been outright rejected by a lot of these women who subscribe to feminism. Unfortunately, I have a huge bone to pick with the whole ideology of women just needing to be widgets in a factory and needing to serve their overlords until they can retire instead of having children, being focused on their career. But anyway, that's a very dark note to end on. I'm sorry to do that to you guys. Hopefully tomorrow we will have much brighter news and I will have much less depressing takes on all this stuff. Let's read what you guys are saying and then we'll wrap it. Once my wife of 40 years now is gone, I don't want to be here either. Yeah, for sure. Andy says he needs to die first. That is the agreement, but I'm not sure I'm going to be able to pull that off, especially with MS, shortening my lifespan likely. People are so afraid to take any little criticism against the tiny hats. Interesting theory. John says, word, she will divorce him and take half. Harry is a spoiled chump. So from my understanding, he surrendered his guns at his wife's behest, which I find to be a mark of incredible lack of masculine strength. And that is the nicest way I can think of to say that, because he also was overseas with the military and he used to love hunting, and his wife basically just said, no, that scares me. Get rid of it. Quantum Strange Quark, thank you for your super chat. Says, just a test to see if super chat just didn't like what I was saying before. I am able to see your super chat now. Thank you very much for your $5. I really do appreciate it. Planet Fatness says, here's the 5 I was trying to send you yesterday. Thank you very much. I appreciate that for sure as well. Thanks so much for joining us. Church chair, pew, indeed. I asked my psychiatrist to help change my meds in 2020, Summer of Love, and he said I didn't need any changes because white supremacy is evil. I really don't think that actually happened. Hey, Lydia, says Kevin. Hey, Kevin, how's it going? The other Kevin says, and not to get stressed out about the riots because it was justice. My goodness, that's horrifying if true. You should definitely find a different doctor if that actually did happen to you. I agree, Lids. Higher ed is lost. Yeah, for sure. Nail on the head today, Lids. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. John Bordenaro says Royal Soy Boy. Yep, that's entirely correct. That is exactly what Harry is. But at the same time, I do kind of feel bad for him because his mother did die and he lived life in a very public eye, and that's kind of hard. It's very hard for a private person to be up in front of everyone all the time, especially if it is by birth, not because of something they chose to do. Seems like you need a new doctor, Kevin Ovanen. Yes, I completely agree. Seth says men can't handle death as well as women. Yeah, so apparently, so there are really interesting facts about death that I'll just touch on before we wrap here. But apparently, if a wife dies, the husband will die shortly thereafter, because wives do take care of their husbands. They help orchestrate food. In my case, I take care of the budgeting and stuff and all of the other stuff that Andy doesn't really want to handle, because that's part of being married, is that he opens the pickle jar and shovels the snow and I do the budgeting and try to make sure we have food in the fridge. So it's just like a balance of who does what. And then when wives die, men tend to die too, which is a very sad fact to know, but for practical reasons, it makes sense to me. Men do tend to live shorter lives, and there is a prevailing theory that yes, women do handle death better than men, unfortunately, and I'm not sure why that is. I guess it is only fair that women should live longer than if they are capable of handling the death of a partner before their own. So it's very sad and sobering to think about. I'm fine with the idea of my death, but I am not fine with the idea of Andy's death. But that's just a matter of coming around to the concept that everybody does die in the end. It's It's always troubled me that death is the only thing that happens to every single person, but it seems like for whatever reason, people in the West seem to think we're going to live forever. I remember how bothered I was when I would watch someone suffering and languishing and having a really, really hard time, just struggling to breathe on the most extreme comfort measures you could imagine. And their kids call us from another state saying, keep them around. I'm flying out. They still need to be around when I get there. And I'm like, this is not up to you. I'm sorry. It should not be up to you. It's not about you. Your parent is the one suffering right now, and you owe it to them to let them go naturally. And it's just cruel and unusual to try to keep someone around who's really, really ready to go. But that's just from my personal experience. I also watched kids fighting in the hallway over money before their parent's body was even cold on the bed, which was just the most disgusting display of family dysfunction that I had ever seen, and remains one of the worst cases of gross dysfunctionality that is just hard to see, because you're like, man, I don't care what this person's done in the past. Right now, they're in my care, and I'm really doing my best to take care of them. And that's going to involve throwing these people's family out if they don't calm down and stop upsetting my other patients. So things get wild. Death stresses people out. I've heard people say that the food service is a really hard industry to work in because it's thankless and nobody cares about what you do and all the hard work you put in. But I will up you one. Working as a nurse aide in the healthcare system, where the stakes are incredibly high when somebody's parent is in question, when something's going on with their personal health, very, very, very demanding, and you are under intense scrutiny from everybody. You're literally under intense scrutiny by the state, you're under intense scrutiny by your boss, and certainly by the families of the patients that you care for. So I found that you just have to put your head down and work your best to make sure that you're taking the best possible care of your people. And I learned to operate with the mindset that I could always be recorded. Like, I needed to speak as though I were being recorded. I needed to work as if I was being watched every hour of every day that I was at work. And I did work like 80-hour weeks for the majority of my 20s, but I digress on that count. Death comes to us all. It's good to have life insurance. It's good to be prepared. Try to make peace with everybody in your life and try to live a life so that people miss you when you're gone. And that involves a good dose of servant leadership, which will be the high note that I'll leave you guys with for sure. I think that's probably the best thing you can do, is focus on helping others, working with others, working for others, and generally trying to move your focus outside yourself as much as humanly possible, which is advice that Prince Harry could certainly take, and I hope that all of you guys will take to heart as well. Andy is back. You missed the whole thing, darn it. Andy's a stud. Pickle jars, yes. Andy's actually super ripped. He can do crazy amounts of push-ups. He clears snow like a champ. And he's very, very cute when he's holding the cat. You guys should check out the lighter dips over on Instagram, LEITERDIPS. That is our family Instagram, which is literally just pictures of Dip and sometimes pictures of Andy. We are adding the puppy to the fold starting on Sunday. Very excited for that. Hopefully we'll have her settled in by the time Monday's live stream rolls around, but if we don't, you'll get to experience life with Dot. That'll be a lot of fun. Little Princess Dot. I'm really looking forward to having another lady in the house for sure. We'll be 2-2. So right now we have 2 boys and me, and soon we'll have 2 girls and 2 boys. It's going to be perfect. All right, you guys, thank you all for joining me. I will see you all tomorrow at the same time, and we'll keep it. Oh no, tomorrow's Wednesday. Never mind. So we'll be able to go just as long as we did today. Again, thank you all for joining me. Thank you for your super chats. I will see you all tomorrow. Until then, bye guys. How's it going?